April 8th, 1943. 27,000 feet above the English Channel, the pre-dawn darkness slowly giving way to the pale light of approaching morning. Flight Lieutenant James "Jock" McCready's gloved hands grip the control column of his Supermarine Spitfire MKV, call sign Red 3, as he scans the grey expanse below for any sign of the German formation they were scrambled to intercept. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine purrs smoothly beneath the cowling, but Jock can feel something different in its character today, something that wasn't there yesterday during the pre-dawn tests at Biggin Hill. The engineers had called it Project Elliptical, a ridiculous waste of time in his opinion. Some newfangled elliptical radiators and modified cooling system that the brass swore would improve engine performance by a few horsepower. What a joke. More weight, same old engine, or so he thought. Red leader to red flight. Crackles the voice of Squadron Leader Patterson through his headset. Bandits 12 o'clock low. Dornier 217's approximately 2 miles. Jock's eyes narrow as he spots them, 3 silver shapes glinting in the early morning sun, moving in that distinctive shallow V formation that spelled trouble for any shipping they might be targeting in the channel. His hands move automatically to check his 8.3 103 caliber machine guns, but his mind drifts for just a moment to the heated argument he'd witnessed 2 weeks ago between Biggin Hill's chief test pilot and the Ministry of Aircraft Production representative. Extra weight for no tactical advantage. The test pilot had argued, his voice carrying across the dispersal hut where Jock had been checking his instruments. The elliptical radiators add 12 pounds for what may be 2 degrees better cooling efficiency. It's madness when we need every ounce of performance we can get. But the ministry man had been insistent. The data shows improved cooling across the entire operating envelope Peterson. Better cooling means we can run higher boost pressures, maintain optimal performance for longer durations in combat. He tapped the stack of reports on the table. Your job is to test it, not question the strategic requirements. Jock shoves the memory aside as the formation closes with the enemy. The Dorniers are flying at 20,000 feet, their own escort of Messerschmitt 109s nowhere to be seen. Easy targets, or so it should have been. The Spitfires of NO's 610 Squadron have altitude advantage, speed advantage, numerical advantage, classic textbook engagement, except that Jock would have banked on the familiar ritual. Climbing to 25,000, diving through their formation, taking putt shots at best and hoping to... The old MKVers could roll, turn and climb respectably, but they were by no means the thoroughbred racing machines the later marks would become. His thumb finds the throttle quadrant as Red Leader gives the attack call. The supercharger kicks in with that characteristic surge and Jock feels his body press back into the seat as his engine roars to life. But this time, sweet lord, this time is different. Acceleration is immediate and brutal. Not the gradual building of speed he'd grown accustomed to over months of flying the MKV, but something approaching the savage thrust of the German fighters he'd tangled with. His airspeed indicator needle climbs past 250 mph, 280, 380, 310 mph in seconds. The elliptical radiators, those supposedly useless weight penalties, are somehow maintaining perfect engine temperature, even as he pushes the Merlin into regimes that would have seen the old cooling system overheat in seconds. A Dornier's gunner opens fire first, long yellow streams of tracer arcing up toward the attacking Spitfires. Jock pulls through the formation, his guns chattering in their familiar staccato rhythm, but his mind is racing far faster than his aircraft. The Spitfire isn't just accelerating faster, it's turning tighter, maintaining energy in ways that defy everything he knows about its capabilities. By the time he's completed his first pass, the Dorniers are already breaking formation, their pilots realizing they're facing something entirely new. The 109s that should have been their escort have appeared on the horizon like angry hornets. But Jock finds himself in a position he's never experienced before. He's not just holding his own against superior German pilots, he's commanding the energy advantage. The dogfight that follows is a revelation. At 25,000 feet, with the eastern sky painting itself in shades of golden crimson, Jock discovers that the elliptical radiators and their supposedly worthless cooling improvements haven't just made his engine run cooler. They've transformed his Spitfire into a high-speed predator capable of sustaining the kind of performance that separates victories from statistics on a casualty board. When the smoke finally clears and Red Flight limps home to Biggin Hill, Jock taxis his aircraft past the line of standard MiG-AVS and cannot help but smile grimly at the irony. The upgrade he dismissed as bureaucratic meddling has given him a weapon that can outrun, outclimb, and outfight anything the Luftwaffe currently fields in the Western theatre. As he shuts down the engine and climbs out of the cockpit, the test pilot Peterson approaches with that ministry man in tow, both of their faces bearing identical expressions of barely contained excitement. Well, Peterson demands, though his grin gives away his true feelings. What do you think of our useless weight penalty now? Jock wipes the sweat from his brow with the back of his leather flight glove, his mind still racing from the magnitude of what he's just experienced. The adrenaline of combat has faded, leaving him with a crystalline clarity about what just happened above the channel. He looks back at his Spitfire, the elliptical radiators gleaming faintly in the morning sunlight, the engine still ticking as it cools in the spring air. "Peterson," Jock says quietly, his voice carrying a weight of understanding that surprises even him. "You've just turned a thoroughbred into a greyhound. That wasn't a 12-pound weight penalty. That was 12 pounds of pure genius." The ministry representative, whose nameplate reads Dr. H.E. Vickers, technical liaison, steps forward with a leather portfolio clutched against his chest. His eyes shine with the fervour of a man whose theories have just been validated in the most dramatic fashion possible. "The beauty wasn't in the weight reduction," Vickers explains, his voice carrying the precise accent of Cambridge education. "It was in how we distributed that weight and fundamentally altered the thermodynamic properties of the entire cooling system." Inside the dispersal hut, Peterson spreads detailed technical drawings across a wooden table scarred by years of pilots' boots and oil stains. The schematics show something that would have been heresy to traditional supermarine engineers, a complete reimagining of how the Merlin engine cooled itself. Traditional circular radiators, Peterson taps his finger on the drawings, created turbulent airflow, inefficient heat exchange, and critical hotspots under sustained high-power settings. The elliptical design, 12 pounds of additional weight in the right places, creates laminar flow characteristics that our wind tunnel testing showed could improve cooling efficiency by up to 23% across the entire operating envelope. Vickers picks up the narrative, his excitement barely contained. But cooling efficiency was just the beginning. With the elliptical radiators maintaining optimal engine temperatures, we could safely run the Merlin at higher boost pressures for extended periods. With aircraft capable of sustained high-speed performance, the traditional defensive protocols begin to evolve. No longer are they constrained by the limitations of aircraft that would overheat during extended engagements. Now they could pursue defeated enemies, maintain altitude advantage throughout extended battles, and impose their will on engagements rather than responding to German initiative. By June 1943, reports filtering back from operational squadrons paint a picture of transformation that goes beyond simple performance improvements. The elliptical radiators have unlocked capabilities that redefine what a single-seat fighter can achieve in combat. Climbing rates improve by nearly 15%, operational service ceilings increase by several thousand feet, and most crucially, sustained high-speed performance becomes standard rather than exceptional. Wing Commander Sharkey Blatchford, commanding No. 127 Wing based at Biggin Hill, summarizes the tactical revolution in terms that speak to the reality of aerial combat. "The Germans have always prided themselves on superior engineering, on aircraft that could outperform ours in every measurable category. But this elliptical radiator system, the ministry's waste of time project, has flipped that assumption on its head. Our aircraft now possess sustained performance characteristics that their fighters simply cannot match. The operational tempo of fighter command accelerates dramatically. Missions that would previously have been limited to brief intercepts become extended aerial battles where RAF pilots maintain initiative throughout. German bomber crews operating over southern England report increasing difficulty in completing their missions, their escorts finding themselves outmatched by Spitfires that refused to disengage when previously they would have been forced to break contact due to engine limitations. But perhaps the most significant impact is psychological. Pilots who had grown accustomed to fighting at a disadvantage discover that they now possess decisive advantages in every engagement. The confidence that comes from technological superiority manifests in more aggressive tactics, better formation flying, and a willingness to engage enemy formations that previously would have been avoided. By August 1943, the elliptical radiator system has been installed on over 400 aircraft across Fighter Command, with production lines beginning to incorporate the design into new builds. The Air Ministry's initial skepticism has transformed into enthusiastic support as operational reports confirm the tactical advantages predicted by the engineering teams. Standing on the tarmac at Biggin Hill, watching a formation of 6 elliptical radiator-equipped Spitfires climb into the evening sky for a sweep over northern France, Jock reflects on how completely the upgrade has transformed their operational capabilities. What began as a dismissed weight penalty has become the foundation for a new generation of fighters that can sustain performance levels previously thought impossible for single-engine aircraft. The war in the skies over Europe is changing, and these useless radiators are leading that transformation. The elliptical radiator's success wasn't lost on the Luftwaffe for long. By late autumn 1943, intercept reports streaming into WWII 26's headquarters at Saint-Paul-Braise painted a grim picture. Pilots returning from engagements over Pas-de-Calais in northern France described an enemy Spitfire behaving with impossible energy, accelerating away from attacks that should have been decisive, outclimbing interceptors with seeming ease, and holding speeds that rendered traditional German tactics obsolete. Squadron reports from JG-26, the elite Richthofen Geschwader, became increasingly laced with a new word: unmöglich, impossible. October 15th, 1943, Luftwaffe Headquarters, Berlin. The oak-panelled room felt heavier than usual as Oberst Hans-Joachim Heinz Marseille, the famed star of Africa, though recently reassigned to defence duties in France, stood before a map of the Channel fronts. His face, usually a mask of detached confidence, was etched with concern. Beside him, the technical expert, Oberstleutnant Heinsberg, leaned over a dossier, pointing at a grainy photograph of a Spitfire, MKV specifically, one bearing the distinctive, slimmer radiators beneath its wings. The reports are consistent, Oberst, baited, his voice clipped. The MKV Spitfires over France are displaying sustained performance characteristics we cannot currently counter. Climbing rates consistently 10-15% higher than our best assessments, higher operational ceilings, acceleration that allows them to disengage or re-engage at will. Crucially, their engines don't collapse during prolonged combat. They maintain camouflage Windy-Cape combat speed for durations we thought impossible for them. Marseille traced a route on the map with a gloved finger. Main Oberst, this isn't just about a single fighter. They are using these machines to shield bomber streams we cannot reach effectively, to escort fighter bombers hitting our coastal installations with impunity. They are dictating the tempo of engagements. We must respond. The response, engineered deep within the technical bureaus of the Reichsluftfahrt Ministerium, had already begun. Facing the stark reality of the Spitfire's newfound dominance, particularly was pronounced against the formidable Messerschmitt Bf 109G at high altitude, German engineers turned to their most powerful fighter, the Focke-Wulf fighter, the Focke-Wulf 198 Kampfgeschwader variant. While retaining the powerful BMW 801D2 radial engine that gave the Butcher Bird its legendary low to medium altitude prowess, engineers knew they needed altitude supremacy to counter the modified Spitfire. The solution wasn't just an engine swap that would have been catastrophic for the 190's balance. Instead, they integrated the GM1 system, Gesellschaft für Motorenforschung Injection, colloquially known as Go Faster Gas, November 3rd, 1943. Erprobungsstelle Test Establishment, Rection. Oberstleutnant Bear watched from the flight line as a new Fuchs 190A8, its familiar line subtly modified, roared down the runway. At the controls was Major Kurt Welter, a highly experienced pilot and JG-26's experimental test pilot. Welter's mission was clear: test the GM1 system against the reported performance of the elliptical radiator Spitfire. Climbing to 30,000 feet, Welter pushed the BMW 801 into its upper limits. Without GM1, the 190 struggled, engine power falling off notoriously at extreme altitude. But activating the GM1 system injected nitrous oxide directly into the supercharger intake. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The radial engine surged with unexpected power, the climb rate steepened visibly. Acceleration snapped forward, performance that had sagged became potent. "Reports, Major?" Bear queried as Welter taxied in, the A8 still steaming slightly in the cold air. Welter climbed down, his expression cautiously optimistic. "Oberstleutnant, it's a significant..." Climbing performance is now competitive with their best figures. Acceleration from altitude is markedly improved. But, he paused, wiping his forehead, it's not a seamless victory. The Spitfires still hold advantages in sustained energy retention. I could maintain GM1 boosts, but only for limited bursts. Push it too long, and the engine temperature climbs dangerously. It requires meticulous management. The gamble was set. GM1 offered a tactical bandoed a short-lived burst of competitive performance, but it demanded immense pilot skill and nerve, turning every high-altitude engagement into a tense duel against an overstressed engine. As Bear knew, Welter's successful test meant the A8 was now ready for deployment against the transformed Spitfire, but it came at the cost of pilot endurance and reliability. That November evening at Rechlin, Bear watched the sun set over rows of BF-109GS and FW-190s, the sky now patrolled by a new breed of enhanced predator. The useless elliptical radiators hadn't just improved the Spitfire, they had forced the Luftwaffe into a desperate technological arms race, pushing the limits of their own machines to counter a threat born from a dismissed engineering gamble. The high-altitude sky over Europe was about to become even more lethal and unpredictable. November 21st, 1943. 30,000 ft above the chalk cliffs of the English Channel. The sky is a deep, bruised violet that stretches toward the low-lying sun. The wind is a thin, cold blade that slices through the thin fabric of your cockpit canopy, and every breath you draw feels like it could crystallize in the air. Below you, a distant carpet of white-capped waves shivers in the perpetual motion of the sea, but your eyes are fixed on the dark line of contrails climbing toward the western horizon. It's a bomber raid. Hankohy 111s, escorted by a thin screen of Focke-Wulf 190s. The Luftwaffe's Kampfviehschwede formation is pushing toward the French coast, intent on striking the Allied radar stations that have been a thorn in their flank for months. Your own squadron, No. 610, has been scrambled from Biggin Hill, and you, Flight Lieutenant James Jock McCready, are on the wing of your trusted MKV Spitfire, now christened the White Raptor by the ground crews. The elliptical radiators gleam faintly on the cowling, their sleek oval shape catching the early light like a promise of something untested. You hear the sudden bark of a radio transmission cutting through the static. Red Leader, Bandits 310, heading 35, altitude 24,000. The voice is flat, emotionless, but the words ignite a fire in your chest. You glance at the temperature gauge on your instrument panel. The needle hovers just below the red line, a testament to the new cooling system that had once been dismissed as extra weight with zero combat value. The elliptical radiators are doing exactly what Dr. Vickers and his team predicted, maintaining an optimal coolant temperature even as you push the Rolls-Royce Merlin to its limits. Your throttle is set to maximum boost, the supercharger whine rising into a scream that seems to vibrate the very bones of the aircraft. The German bombers appear first, their silhouettes like black insects against the pale sky. Behind them, a thin line of FW-198s glides forward, each bearing the telltale AGM marking on their fuselage. You can see the faint haze of nitrous oxide vapor escaping from the exhaust of the lead 190 as the pilot engages the Go Faster gases system. For a moment, the sky is a chessboard of engine roars and whistling wind. Your heart pounds in rhythm with the Merlin's relentless power. You roll the Spitfire into a steep dive, the air screaming past your ears as the speed indicator climbs past 350 mph, then 380, then 400. The elliptical radiators are working as designed, no overheating, no loss of power. The airframe feels tight, responsive, like a predator loosed from restraint. You level out just below the bomber formation, slipping into the rear of their formation with a precision that seems almost effortless. The first He-111 is directly in front of you, its engines coughing as the crew attempts to adjust course. You press the trigger on your 303 machine guns, the bright orange tracer stream stitching a line across its fuselage. The enemy plane shudders, then erupts into a fireball that paints the sky a hellish orange. The sudden loss of the bomber draws the attention of the 190 escorts. The leading German pilot, Hauptmann Klaus Weber, banks his FW-190 hard to the right, his engine roaring as he engages the GM-1 system. The nitrous injection gives his BMW 801 a sudden surge, the radial engine whining as it pushes the aircraft beyond its normal envelope. You can see his propeller blur, his aircraft flashing past your line of sight like a streak of metal. You flip the Spitfire onto its left wing, your speed now approaching 460 mph. The elliptical radiators keep the Merlin's temperature stable, allowing you to maintain that burst of acceleration even as the German fighter tries to outrun you. The 190's nose points upward, the GM-1 boost pushing it toward the altitude you now dominate. You pull the stick back, feeling the G-force press you into the seat as Spitfire climbs with a ferocious rate that would have been impossible in the older MKV without the radiators. The battle becomes a high-altitude chase, a ballet of speed and heat. You can hear the faint crackle of the German's radio as Weber calls out, "Achtung!" Engine temperature climbing, hold the boost. He is forced to cycle the GM-1, injecting only in short bursts, then shutting off to allow the engine to cool. Each time he turns the system on, his speed spikes, but the heat builds quickly. You, on the other hand, are running the Merlin at full tilt, the elliptical radiators absorbing the excess heat and keeping the engine within its optimal range. The air trembles with the sound of machine gun fire and cannon shells. You manage to take out 2 more bombers, the sky now a plume of smoke and flame. The remaining FW-190s, unable to sustain their boost, peel off, their pilots waving off as their engines protest the high temperatures. Weber's aircraft limps away, the cockpit glass fogged with the heat of the GM-1 system, his radio static fading into the background. You level off at 28,000 FT, the wind now a gentler caress. The sun breaks through the clouds, casting a golden hue over the battlefield. The English Channel glitters like a sheet of broken mirrors. Your aircraft's engine hums a low, satisfied note, the elliptical radiators having done their job flawlessly. The Spitfire feels like a living creature, its speed a tangible thing you can almost taste. The airspeed indicator settles at 470 mph, a number that had once been dismissed as impossible for a MKV, now reality under your gloved hands. You glance at the battered German formation retreating over the French coast, their escort gone, their bombers scattered. The sky belongs to the Allies for the moment, but you know this is only the beginning. The technology you once scorned, those elliptical radiators, has turned your Spitfire into a 470 mph monster fighter. In the distance you can hear the low rumble of the next wave of bombers and the quiet promise of the new WWII on the horizon, armed with even more powerful engines and a refined cooling system. But today, the wind carries the taste of victory on its icy breath, and the sky is yours. Spring returned to Biggin Hill in 1944, softening the hard edges of the concrete runways and breathed new life into the hedgerows surrounding the aerodrome. The smell of oil and high-octane fuel mingled with the scent of hawthorn blossoms carried on a warmer wind. You, Flight Lieutenant James Jock McCready, walked slowly across the familiar tarmac, your boots clicking a steady rhythm. In your flight jacket pocket, you carried a small warped piece of metal, a fragment shorn from the exhaust stack of Hauptmann Weber's crippled FW-190. a tangible reminder of that November day that felt both a lifetime ago and vividly present. The White Raptor sat silent in its dispersal pen, its elliptical radiators gleaming like watchful eyes under the morning sun. The transformation wasn't just yours. It had swept through fighter command like a controlled burn. Pilots who had once cursed the added weight of the elliptical radiators now swore by them. The skepticism that had greeted Dr. Vickers' shy presentation and Peterson's nervous advocacy had vanished entirely. Instead, there was a quiet reverence, a pilot-to-pilot acknowledgement of the fundamental shift the upgrade represented. It wasn't just a mechanical modification, it was a psychological weapon. Knowing your aircraft could hold its own at the edge of its envelope, sustained by relentless, reliable power, changed how men flew and fought. The old Ning KV, already a fine handler, had been nudged into a different class of predator. Walking past the technical dispersal hut where the arguments had raged, Jock saw Technical Officer Vickers alone at a bench, meticulously cataloguing components for the growing fleet of MK beginning to arrive. Those new fighters with their even more powerful Griffon engines would inherit and amplify the advantages first proven by the elliptical radiators. It was a line of descent starting with the dismissed upgrade. Doctor? Vickers? Jock called softly, not wishing to startle the concentrated man. Vickers looked up, a small, weary smile crossing his features. Flight Lieutenant McCready. A pleasure, as always. He gestured to the radiator call lying before him. Hard to believe, isn't it? That this useless weight, as some called it, became the very heartbeat of our victory out there. Jock turned the fragment of German aircraft metal over in his palm. It's transformed everything, Doc. Not just the aircraft. Us. Knowing we have the performance, it makes all the difference when you're staring down a formation of 190s. Vickers nodded, his eyes distant for a moment. The Air Ministry memoranda, the pilot reports, the operational analyses, they paint a picture far exceeding our most optimistic projections. The elliptical radiators unlocked sustained performance we hadn't dared dream possible. Higher operational ceilings, faster climb rates, superior acceleration. He paused, a thin smile touching his lips, but more than that, they silenced the critics, or rather, the results did. Above them, the sound of a squadron taking off shattered the calm 8 Mackay verses, their white recognition flashes bright against the morning sky. Jock watched their silhouettes climb, already lost in the blue, their engines singing a new tune born of reliable, unpressurized power. What about the enemy? Jock asked, his voice low. How did they adapt? Vickers' expression darkened slightly. The GM1 system was a desperate measure, McCready. A chemical band-aid. It gave temporary boosts, but at immense cost reliability, engine longevity, pilot workload. Our modification enhanced inherent capability. It was sustainable. They were forced to gamble on bursts of artificial power. He shook his head. It wasn't a fair fight in the end. They were trying to match our steady endurance with frantic bursts. The war was far from over. The skies over Normandy buzzed with deadly intent, but the fundamental balance had shifted irrevocably that November day over the Channel. The elliptical radiators, initially derided as a waste of time, had hammered the final nail into the coffin of German air superiority over Western Europe. They had turned a Spitfire MKV, a trusted mount, into a 470 mph monster, a machine capable of dictating the terms of engagement at high altitude against the best the Luftwaffe could field. Standing on the edge of the Biggin Hill airfield, Jock watched the last of his squadron's aircraft vanish into the vastness of the English sky. The chill of the spring air was forgotten, replaced by the feeling of warm sunlight on his face. The fragment of German metal in his pocket seemed suddenly insignificant. The real story was written in the sky, in the sustained roar of a Merlin engine running at optimal temperature thanks to an overlooked piece of engineering genius. It was the story of how a dismissed upgrade had become the silent architect of victory. The elliptical radiators weren't just cooling fins. They were the iron determination of Vickers and the quiet faith of Peterson, forged into metal and fitted beneath the wings of legend. They transformed a fighter into a high-speed predator, and in doing so, transformed the war itself.